$3 million, Miss Williams. Take it or leave it. The voice on the phone was smooth, cold, and utterly devoid of negotiation. It was the voice of a man who didn't ask. He commanded. It was the voice of Mr. Sterling, the phantom developer who'd been trying to buy my animal shelter, the Serenity Paws Sanctuary, for weeks. My hands trembled, clutching the worn-out receiver in my tiny, cluttered office. $3 million. It was a fortune that could solve every problem I had, and 100 more I hadn't even thought of yet. It could clear my late father's debts, fix my crumbling apartment building, and maybe, just maybe, let me sleep for more than 3 hours a night. But it would mean bulldozing this place, my legacy, the only home these animals had ever known. A frantic bark from the kennel snapped me back to the present. It was Buster, a one-eyed pit bull mix who'd been abandoned on the highway. I looked at his photo on my desk, his single brown eye full of a trust one felt I was about to betray. All I had to do was say yes. We get it. Life can feel like it's cornering you sometimes. If you're watching this, drop a subscribe and tell us where you're from and what time it is in the comments. We love knowing where our stories are reaching. Now back to what was about to unfold. I took a shaky breath, the smell of disinfectant and damp dog fur filling my lungs. This shelter wasn't just a building. It was a promise I'd made to my mother on her deathbed. I can't, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. This place, it's not for sale. There was a beat of silence on the other end of the line, so profound it felt like the world had stopped spinning. I expected him to hang up, or for his assistant, Mr. Graves, to come back on the line with another sterile corporate threat. Instead, the man himself spoke again, his voice dangerously soft. That's the very expensive no, Miss Williams. I hope you know what you're doing. The click was final. The line went dead, but a new kind of dread, cold and sharp, had just been born. I spent the rest of the day in a haze of anxiety, scrubbing kennels and feeding the cats with an almost manic energy, trying to erase the sound of his voice from my mind. The shelter was bleeding money, and I was just one overflowing vet bill away from total collapse. Mr. Sterling's offer had been a lifeline, and I'd just cut it. That night, the storm I'd been dreading all day finally broke. Rain hammered against my apartment windows, each gust of wind sounding like an accusation. I was staring at a mountain of red-stamped envelopes when I heard it, a sharp, insistent knock on my door. It wasn't the tentative rap of a neighbor or the cheerful double tap of a delivery person. This was heavy, solid, and demanded to be answered. My heart leaped into my throat. It was nearly midnight. No one ever came to my door this late. Peeking through the peephole, I saw nothing but the distorted, rain-streaked hallway. A trick of the wind, I told myself, my hand hovering over the deadbolt. The knock came again, louder this time, shaking the flimsy wood of the door. Miss Williams, a deep voice rumbled from the other side. Open the door. It wasn't a request. It was the voice from the phone. My blood ran cold. How'd he find me? This wasn't the shelter's address. This was my private, unlisted home. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers too slick with nervous sweat to dial 911 properly. I have no interest in hurting you, the voice continued, smoother now, almost patient. We simply need to talk. It's much less pleasant for us both to do it through the door. My mind raced. What choice did I have? He knew where I lived. If I didn't open it, he might just break it down. Slowly, my trembling fingers undid the locks. The door swung inward to reveal two men. The one in front was tall and broad, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that seemed to absorb the dim hallway light. His hair was black, his jaw was sharp, and his eyes were a startling shade of gray, like a winter storm, and they were fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. This had to be Mr. Sterling. The man behind him was even larger, a mountain of muscle with a shaved head and a stoic expression. "May I come in?" Sterling asked, though he was already stepping across the threshold, his expensive leather shoes silent on my worn linoleum floor. He scanned my tiny apartment with a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Disdain, maybe, or simple observation. He was danger poured into a human form, and he was standing in the middle of my living room. I felt myself shrink under his gaze, my worn-out pajamas and messy bun suddenly feeling like a declaration of my own failure. He'd seen my fortress of solitude, my crumbling shelter, and now he was seeing the pathetic reality of the woman who ran it. "What do you want?" I managed to squeak out, wrapping my arms around myself. He ignored my question, his gaze landing on the pile of bills on my kitchen table. He walked over, picked up the topmost envelope, an eviction notice, and examined it with cold detachment. "You're in trouble, Miss Williams," he stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "Deeper trouble than you realize." He dropped the letter back onto the pile. "Your father, Daniel Williams, borrowed a significant amount of money before he passed. He borrowed it from the wrong people." A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I knew about my father's gambling debts, but I thought they were just to local bookies, manageable troubles. Sterling's tone suggested something far worse. "Those people," he said, turning his full attention back to me, "now consider that debt to be yours. They're not as patient as I am. They don't make offers. They take things." The implication hung heavy in the air, thick and suffocating. He wasn't just a developer. He was something else entirely. Something tied to the dark, violent world my father had dabbled in. And I, by refusing his offer, had just landed myself right in the middle of it. The rain lashed against the glass, and in that moment, I realized the storm outside was nothing compared to the one that had just walked through my door. He gestured to my lumpy sofa. "Sit." It wasn't a suggestion. I sat, my body moving on autopilot while my mind screamed. His massive bodyguard remained by the door, a silent, immovable sentinel. Mr. Sterling remained standing, looming over me like a predator assessing its prey. The sheer power radiating from him was suffocating, a physical presence in the small room. He wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful in a way I couldn't comprehend, a primal, dangerous way. "The men your father owed money to, they are under the impression that the shelter property belongs to you," he explained, his voice a low, chilling monotone. "They believe its sale is how you will settle his accounts. Since you have refused to sell to me, they have become agitated. They're going to come for the property. And when they find it's not so easily liquidated, they'll come for you." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "Who are you?" I whispered, the question feeling impossibly small in the face of his revelation. A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. "I'm the man who offered you a way out," he said simply. "My name is Dominic Sterling, and your father owed his debt not just to any street thugs, but to the Cassano family. I am currently in the process of acquiring their assets. That includes their debts, which means, Miss Williams, your father's debt is now owed to me." My world tilted on its axis. He wasn't just a powerful man. He was a mafia boss. The ruthless developer, the phantom buyer, was a leader in the criminal underworld. And I didn't just owe him money. I was his asset, a line item on a ledger of violence and intimidation. He had tried to buy my shelter not just for the land, but to collect on a debt. The $3 million offer wasn't a business transaction. It was a settlement. And I had refused it. I don't have the money," I stammered, the words feeling utterly pathetic. "The shelter barely stays afloat. I have nothing." He watched me, his gray eyes calculating. "You are correct. You have nothing of monetary value," he agreed. "But you have the shelter. That plot of land is worth far more than the debt. However, your refusal complicates things. The Casanos are now aware of my interest, and they see you as leverage against me. He paced the small space in front of my couch, his movements fluid and controlled, like a caged tiger. They will try to harm you to send me a message. They will likely try to destroy the shelter to prove a point. Your principled stand, as admirable as it may be to a stray dog, has put you in direct opposition to people who burn down buildings for fun. The casual way he spoke of such violence sent a fresh wave of terror through me. This was his world. This was his normal. I thought about Buster, about the dozen cats sleeping peacefully in their enclosures, about the elderly golden retriever, Daisy, who needed daily medication. What would happen to them if someone firebombed the sanctuary? The thought was so horrifying it propelled me to my feet. The animals, I gasped. They're helpless. You can't let them get hurt. His eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine surprise in their depths. After everything I've just told you, your first concern is for the animals? I met his gaze, my fear momentarily eclipsed by a fierce, protective anger. They're my responsibility. They are innocent. If you have any decency, you won't let them be harmed because of your business. The silence that followed was heavy and charged. He studied my face, his expression unreadable. I braced myself for dismissal, for cold laughter. Instead, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. No, he said, his voice softer than before. They will not be harmed. He pulled out his phone and typed a quick message. Graves, put a team on the shelter. Full surveillance, 24/7. No one gets near it. No one. He put the phone away and looked back at me. Your animals are safe. Now, we deal with you. Before I could process what that meant, he continued. Pack a bag. You're coming with me. My jaw dropped. What? No, I can't just leave. You seem to be operating under the misapprehension that you have a choice, he stated flatly. The Casanos know where you live. This apartment is the first place they will look. You will not be safe here, not for a single night. You will stay with me until this is resolved. His logic was terrifyingly sound. I was a target. My shabby little apartment wasn't a home. It was a bullseye. But to go with him? To willingly walk into the gilded cage of a mafia boss? It felt like jumping from a fire into the deepest ocean. Where will I go? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. To my home, where you will be protected, he answered. The word protected sounded so much like imprisoned. He saw the hesitation and fear in my eyes, and his expression hardened. The alternative, Miss Williams, is I leave you here. And I assure you, the Casanos will not knock politely. The bodyguard, whose name I later learned was Leo, drove us through the rain-slicked city streets in a black SUV with windows so tinted they turned the world outside into a dark, watery blur. I sat in the back, as far away from Dominic Sterling as the plush leather seat would allow, clutching a hastily packed duffel bag filled with a few changes of clothes and a framed photo of my parents. The silence in the car was thick and absolute, broken only by the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. Dominic hadn't spoken a word to me since I'd numbly agreed to his terms. He simply stared out the window, his profile etched against the strobing city lights, a statue of severe, brooding power. I felt like I was being abducted, ferried away to some unknown fate by a man who moved in a world of shadows and violence. We left the city behind, the towering skyscrapers giving way to sprawling estates hidden behind high stone walls and iron gates. Finally, the SUV slowed and turned into a long, private driveway, stopping before a set of gates so immense they looked like they belonged to a medieval fortress. They swung open silently, and we proceeded up a winding road lined with perfectly manicured trees. We pulled up to a house. No, a mansion. It was a staggering structure of glass, steel, and dark stone, glowing with warm light against the stormy night. It looked less like a home and more like a modern art museum or the headquarters of a Fortune 500 company. It was cold, imposing, and staggeringly beautiful. Leo opened my door, and Dominic was already out, standing on the steps, waiting for me. He led me inside without a word. The interior was even more breathtaking. A two-story foyer with a floor of gleaming black marble stretched before me. A massive, abstract sculpture hung from the ceiling like a captured constellation. The air smelled faintly of leather, clean rain, and something else, something uniquely him. An older woman with kind eyes and her hair in a neat bun, dressed in a simple gray uniform, greeted us at the door. "Mr. Sterling, welcome home." "Elena," he acknowledged with a nod. "This is Miss Williams. She will be staying with us for a while. Show her to the guest suite in the East Wing. See that she has everything she needs." He turned to me, his gray eyes pinning me in place. "You will be safe here. My staff will take care of you. Do not leave the grounds. Do not contact anyone. My security team is everywhere. Am I understood?" I could only nod, my voice lost somewhere in the cavernous space. He gave a final, curt nod and then turned, disappearing down a long hallway, leaving me alone with Elena. Her smile was gentle, but I could see the professional distance in her eyes. I was a package to be handled, a problem to be managed. "This way, miss," she said softly, leading me toward a grand staircase that spiraled upwards into the shadows. The guest suite was larger than my entire apartment. It had a bedroom with a king-size bed piled high with silk pillows, a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a five-star spa, and a sitting area with a fireplace and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a rain-drenched garden. It was a cage, but it was a gilded one. I spent the next few days in a state of suspended reality. I wandered the opulent, empty rooms of the East Wing like a ghost. I ate exquisitely prepared meals I barely tasted, brought to me on a tray by Elena, who always addressed me with polite formality. I was a prisoner in a palace, cut off from everything I knew. The shelter, my animals, my life. My only connection to the outside world was Dominic. He would appear once a day, usually in the evening, to give me what he called an update. He would stand in the doorway of my suite, never fully entering, and deliver concise, emotionless reports. The Casanos attempted to approach the shelter last night. They were discouraged, he'd say, or "We've tracked their primary enforcer. He's being dealt with." The casual brutality of his statements horrified me, yet a sick part of me was relieved. He was a monster, but he was my monster, and he was keeping a promise. He was protecting the animals. During one of his visits, I found the courage to speak. "Why?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Why are you doing all this? You could just take the shelter, force the sale. It would be easier." He watched me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Easier is not always better," he said finally. "You said no. You had every reason to say yes, your debt, your poverty, but you chose to protect something you care about. That is rare." He seemed almost uncomfortable, as if the admission was a crack in his armor. "The Casanos lack honor. They prey on the weak. I do not," he stated, as if this was a simple, immutable law of his universe. He was a killer, a criminal, but he lived by a code. And in his twisted world, my defiance hadn't been an insult. It had been a mark of integrity, a quality he seemed to respect, even if he couldn't afford it himself. I was beginning to see the man behind the monster, and the realization was more frightening than the monster himself. I was starting to understand him. I was in the middle of another sleepless night, staring out at the manicured garden, when the fire alarm blared through the mansion. Red lights flashed along the hallways, and the piercing sound was deafening. Panic seized me. The Casanos. They'd found me. They'd gotten past his security. I scrambled for the door, my heart hammering against my ribs, but before I could touch the handle, it was flung open. Dominic stood there, not a trace of alarm on his face. He wasn't even wearing a suit, but a simple black t-shirt and gray sweatpants. It was the first time I'd seen him look anything less than perfectly formidable. He looked human. "It's a false alarm," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. "A system malfunction, but I need you to come with me." He held out a hand. Without thinking, I took it. His skin was warm, his grip firm and steady. He led me not downstairs towards the exit, but deeper into the mansion, through a series of hallways I'd never seen before. The alarm cut off as abruptly as it had started, plunging us back into silence. He led me into a vast library. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes. A fire crackled in a massive stone hearth, casting a warm, dancing glow over the room. At the center of it all was a large oak desk, and sitting on it, wagging his tail uncertainly, was a one-eyed pit bull mix. "Buster," I whispered, my voice breaking. I dropped Dominic's hand and rushed forward, dropping to my knees. Buster whined with joy, covering my face in slobbery kisses. I hugged him tight, burying my face in his familiar, comforting fur. Tears I hadn't realized I was holding back streamed down my cheeks. "Ow!" I looked up at Dominic, who was watching us from across the room, his arms crossed over his chest. "I had him brought here a few days ago," he said. "The vet at the shelter said his anxiety was getting worse without you. It was becoming a problem for the staff." I couldn't speak. He hadn't just put guards on the building. He had been monitoring the well-being of the individual animals. He had seen that one of them was suffering and had it brought to me. This act of quiet, unexpected kindness shattered the last of my defenses. I saw it then, the deep well of loneliness in him, masked by power and control. He understood what it was to care for something, to be responsible for it. "He's not the only one," he said, gesturing to a corner of the library. Tucked away in a warm, well-lit nook were several large, comfortable-looking carriers. Inside, I saw Daisy, the old golden retriever, and a few of the more timid cats who were deeply bonded to me. He had brought me my family. "Thank you," I choked out, the words feeling hopelessly inadequate. "You were right," he said, his voice low. "They are innocent. They shouldn't suffer because of the failures of men." He came closer, standing over me as I knelt on the floor with Buster. He didn't seem so intimidating now. The firelight softened the hard lines of his face, revealing a vulnerability I had never seen. "I told you I was in the process of acquiring the Cassano organization," he said. "The final move will be made tonight. It will be decisive. By morning, the threat will be gone. Permanently." The casual way he spoke of what was surely a wave of violence was jarring, but I knew what he was telling me. He was ending it. He was cutting the head off the snake to protect me, to protect my shelter. "Stay here," he said softly, "in a library. It's the most secure room in the house. Elena will bring you anything you need. By morning, this will be over." He turned to leave, but I scrambled to my feet. "Dominic," I said, using his first name for the first time. He stopped, his back to me. "Be careful," I whispered. He paused for a moment, and though I couldn't see his face, I felt the weight of that moment settle between us. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, and then he was gone, leaving me in the warm, fire-lit library with the quiet sounds of the animals I loved, my heart aching, with a terrifying mix of fear and a feeling I didn't dare name. Love blooming in the deadliest of circumstances. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat by the fire, Buster's head in my lap, Daisy snoozing at my feet, and listened to the silence of the house. It was a loaded silence, filled with the things I couldn't see, with the violent reality of Dominic's world unfolding somewhere out in the city. Every creak of the old house, every sigh of the wind outside the armored windows made me jump. I was terrified for him. This man who had entered my life like a storm, who had frightened and intimidated me, had also become my unlikely protector. He had shown me a kindness no one else had. He understood my devotion to the helpless because he, in his own way, was the same. He protected his people, his territory, with the same fierce, uncompromising loyalty I had for my animals. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to filter through the tall library windows when I heard footsteps approaching. The heavy doors swung open, and Dominic stood there. He was still in the same dark clothes from the night before, but he looked exhausted. There was a small, clean cut on his cheekbone and a weariness in his eyes that went bone deep. But he was alive. He was here. He walked into the room, his gaze immediately finding mine. "It's over," he said, his voice rough with fatigue. "The Cassano family no longer exists as a concern. The debt is canceled. You are free." A wave of relief, so powerful it made me dizzy, washed over me. It was done. The threat was gone. I was safe. The shelter was safe. I should have been ecstatic. I should have been planning my departure from this beautiful prison. But as I looked at him, standing there in the morning light, I felt a pang of loss so sharp it stole my breath. Leaving meant leaving him. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He came to the fireplace and stood before me, looking down at me on the floor with Buster. "Now," he began, "you have a choice. You can return to your old life. I have arranged for your father's debts to be expunged completely. I have also set up an anonymous trust to fund the Serenity Paws Sanctuary indefinitely. It will never want for money again. Your apartment building has been purchased, the deed put in your name, and a contracting firm has been hired to renovate it completely. You can go back to your world, and you will never have to worry about money or threats again. It was everything I could have ever dreamed of. Financial security. The safety of my shelter guaranteed forever. My old life, but polished and perfect with all the broken parts fixed. It was a prince's ransom, a king's gift. But it felt empty. And the other choice? I asked, my heart pounding. He knelt down, so we were at eye level. The firelight flickered in his gray eyes. "The other choice," he said slowly, his voice dropping to an intimate murmur, "is that you stay. Not as my guest, not as my prisoner, but as my partner, as my wife." The word hung in the air between us, shocking and perfect. He reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering on my cheek. "I came into your life to collect a debt, Amelia. But you showed me something I thought was lost. Integrity, selflessness. You stood up to me for the sake of stray animals. You have a strength I've never seen in anyone. This world," he gestured around the opulent library, "is cold. It's violent, and it's lonely. You bring light into it. You bring warmth." He took a deep breath, the admission costing him. "I don't just want to protect you. I want to live in your light. But I will not force you. The choice is yours. A safe, comfortable life without me, or a dangerous, complicated life with me." I looked into his eyes, into the eyes of the Mafia boss, the killer, the dark protector. And I saw the man, a man haunted by his own darkness, who saw a flicker of hope in me. My old life was safe, yes, but was also small. Here in this dangerous, magnificent world, I had found a strange sense of belonging. I had found a man who saw me, truly saw me, and respected the very core of who I was. I leaned forward and pressed my lips against his. It was a soft, hesitant kiss, but it was an answer. When I pulled back, I saw the raw emotion in his eyes. Relief, shock, and a fierce, possessive joy. "I'm not afraid of the dark," I whispered. A genuine smile, the first I had ever seen, transformed his face. It was breathtaking. Good, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Because you are my light. He kissed me again, and this time there was no hesitation. It was a kiss of promises made and a future claimed, a collision of two worlds that had, against all odds, found their center in each other. The storm was finally over, and in its wake, something beautiful and wild had begun to grow. Life with Dominic Sterling was a study in contrasts. One moment, I would be on the floor of our library, my library now, organizing a kitten adoption event over the phone with Buster snoring at my side. The next, I would be dressed in a gown worth more than my old apartment, standing by Dominic's side at a charity gala, surrounded by the city's elite, none of whom knew that the impeccably dressed philanthropist beside me held the city's underworld in an iron grip. He never hid the reality of his world from me, but he shielded me from its direct impact. The violence was a distant thunder, a storm on a horizon I never had to face. My world became the mansion, the shelter, and the ever-expanding network of animal rescue charities he funded in my name. He had given me a platform and unlimited resources to do the work I loved on a scale I had never imagined possible. The Serenity Paws Sanctuary was rebuilt from the ground up, transformed into a state-of-the-art facility with a top-tier veterinary clinic and sprawling, park-like enclosures. I ran it not as a desperate manager struggling to make payroll, but as the director of a foundation, my days filled with purpose and the joy of seeing countless animals find safety and love. Dominic took an active interest in it all. He'd walk the grounds of the new sanctuary with me, his imposing presence oddly gentle as he stooped to pet a nervous beagle or listened intently as I explained the dietary needs of a litter of orphaned raccoons. The staff, who were all vetted and hired by his security team, learned to see him not as a terrifying mob boss, but as Amelia's husband, the quiet, serious man who signed all the checks and had a soft spot for the three-legged cat who had claimed his office chair as its own. Our home, once a cold fortress, warmed with life. We adopted more animals from the shelter, ones that were deemed unadoptable due to age or medical issues. A grumpy old parrot named Captain, who only knew how to swear, became a permanent fixture in the kitchen, occasionally shouting insults at Elena, who took it with amused grace. The sprawling gardens became a playground for a trio of aging greyhounds. The gilded cage had become a home, filled with the chaotic, comforting presence of a family we had built together. The human element of Dominic's world remained at a distance. I knew of Leo, his ever-present shadow, and Mr. Graves, the efficient, disembodied voice who managed the legitimate side of his empire. They treated me with a deep, unwavering respect that Dominic had commanded. To them, I was not just the boss's wife. I was the one who had brought a measure of peace to their volatile leader. One evening, as we sat by the fire, I asked him about the cut on his cheek from the night he had ended the Cassano threat. He had a faint scar there now, a tiny white line that was only visible in the right light. He touched it absently. It's a reminder, he said, his voice quiet. A reminder that some things are worth fighting for, and that even in a victory, there is always a cost. He turned to look at me, his gray eyes serious. Before you, I only fought for power, for control. Now, I fight to protect this, to protect our peace. He saw the fear that his world still sometimes sparked in me. Amelia, he said, taking my hand, I made a promise to myself that night. That violence will never touch you. It is the price I pay so that you can live in the light. It was the most romantic and most heartbreaking thing anyone had ever said to me. He lived in the darkness so I could be safe in the sun. He carried the weight of his violent world so that mine could be filled with healing and hope. I was not a captive, but a queen in a kingdom he had built and defended for me. Our love wasn't a fairy tale. It was a gritty, complex reality, forged in danger and sealed in a shared understanding. He was the storm, and I was the eye of it, a center of calm and purpose that gave his dangerous world a meaning beyond mere survival. We had found in each other the missing pieces of our own souls, creating a life that was both perilous and profoundly beautiful. One drizzly Tuesday, a few years into our marriage, Mr. Graves called me directly, a rare occurrence. His voice was as starched and formal as ever, but I could detect an undercurrent of something unusual. "Mrs. Sterling," he began, "forgive the intrusion. There is a matter regarding a new acquisition. Mr. Sterling thought you might wish to be involved." An acquisition? That was Dominic's world, the world of hostile takeovers and shadowy business consolidation. I had nothing to do with that side of his life. "What sort of acquisition, Mr. Graves?" I asked, stroking the head of a blind calico cat purring in my lap. "It's a portfolio of distressed properties," he explained. "Small businesses, mostly in default. One of them is an animal shelter, the Second Chance Haven, on the verge of bankruptcy. The owner is an elderly woman who is about to be evicted. Given your expertise," I understood immediately. Dominic was going to buy it, just like he had tried to buy my shelter all those years ago. But this time was different. He wasn't sending a cold offer from a faceless corporation. He was sending me. I arrived at the shelter later that day. It was a mirror image of what Serenity Paws had once been, a small, crumbling building smelling of desperation and bleach, run by a woman whose face was etched with worry and exhaustion. Her name was Margaret, and her eyes held the same fierce love and hopeless resignation I remembered feeling myself. She thought I was from the bank, another harbinger of her failure. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling as she gestured to the overflowing kennels. "I've done everything I can. I just ran out of time." Instead of a $3 million offer, I sat down with her, a cup of weak coffee in my hands, and listened. I listened to her stories about every single animal. I heard the tale of the stray German shepherd found guarding a bus stop and the litter of kittens discovered in a dumpster behind a restaurant. As she spoke, her love for these creatures filled the small, shabby office, pushing back the despair. After an hour, I finally showed her my true purpose. "Margaret," I said gently, "my name is Amelia Sterling. My husband and I run a foundation that supports animal welfare. We're not here to buy your shelter." Her face crumpled, expecting the final blow. I reached across the desk and took her wrinkled hand. "We're here to fund it. For life." The look on her face, the dawning, disbelieving hope, was a gift more precious than any diamond Dominic could have ever given me. I saw my own past in her eyes, and I felt the profound, full-circle nature of my journey. I had gone from being the one who was saved to the one who could offer salvation. When I returned home that evening, I found Dominic in the library, staring into the fire. I came up behind him and wrapped my arms around his shoulders. He leaned back into my embrace, his quiet strength a comforting anchor. "Thank you," I whispered into his hair. He turned his head, his cheek resting against mine. "For what?" "For him," I said, thinking of Dominic. "And for her. You let me give her what you gave me. Not just money. Hope." He captured my hand and brought it to his lips, kissing my knuckles. "I didn't give you hope, Amelia," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You had that all along. It's what drew me to you. You build sanctuaries. I just provide the walls." In that moment, I understood the true nature of our partnership. He was the shield, the fortress, the unwavering wall against the darkness. But I was the one who filled the space within those walls with light, with life, with purpose. He protected the sanctuary, and I made it a home. Together, we were not just a mafia boss and his wife. We were two halves of a whole, a dark protector and a fierce nurturer, bound by a love that was as strong and enduring as the stone walls of our impossible, beautiful home. Standing there, wrapped in his arms, with the sound of our animals sleeping peacefully around us, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. I was no longer a damsel, in distress, but a queen in her own right, ruling a kingdom of kindness beside her dark, devoted king. And our reign had only just begun. If you enjoyed this story, please show your support by liking and subscribing to our channel. Let us know what you thought in the comments, and don't hesitate to share your suggestions for future tales.